Soviet army had entered Afghanistan, but it had not prepared for the war that was waiting for them, a war that would last nearly a decade, drain Soviet resources, and become one of the greatest challenges to Soviet power during the Cold War.
Они не знают, зачем они пришли. Толком никто не знает, зачем они пришли в Афганистан и что им здесь нужно делать. Вот поэтому они к военным действиям.
In the late 1970s, Afghanistan was already a country on the edge. For centuries, its mountains had protected it from foreign powers. But inside those mountains, political tensions were growing, and the government was losing control. In April 1978, a communist group known as the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan seized power in Kabul. The new government promised to modernize the country. It introduced land reforms, expanded education, and attempted to reduce the influence of traditional religious leaders. But these changes were forced through too quickly. Many rural communities saw the reforms as an attack on their religion, culture, and way of life. Protests soon turned into armed resistance. The government responded with arrests, executions, and military force. Instead of restoring order, the violence pushed even more Afghans into rebellion. Meanwhile, the communist government itself was divided. Its leaders fought for power, while the country descended deeper into chaos. By 1979, large parts of Afghanistan were already beyond the government's control. Just across the northern border, the Soviet Union watched with growing concern. Afghanistan had become an important ally, and Moscow feared that its communist government might collapse. What began as an internal political crisis was now becoming an international problem. And soon, the Soviet Union would make a decision that would transform Afghanistan into one of the most dangerous battlefields of the Cold War. By the end of 1979, Afghanistan had become a country collapsing from within. The communist government in Kabul was struggling to survive. Rebel groups known as the Mujahideen were spreading across the countryside, and Soviet leaders feared losing their influence in the region. For Moscow, Afghanistan was more than just a neighboring country. It was a strategic buffer between the Soviet Union and the rest of the world. If Afghanistan fell to an anti-communist movement, Soviet leaders feared it could weaken their position during the Cold War. In December 1979, the Soviet Union made its move. Thousands of Soviet troops crossed into Afghanistan, officially claiming they were protecting their communist ally. But behind the scenes, Moscow planned to replace Afghanistan's unstable leader with someone they believed they could control. Within days, Soviet forces entered Kabul and removed President Hafizullah Amin from power. A new Soviet-backed government was installed. But what Moscow expected to be a quick intervention soon became something far more difficult. The Soviet army had entered Afghanistan, but it had not prepared for the war that was waiting for them. A war that would last nearly a decade, drain Soviet resources, and become one of the greatest challenges to Soviet power during the Cold War.
Они не знают, зачем они пришли. Толком никто не знает, зачем они пришли в Афганистан и что им здесь нужно делать. Вот поэтому они к военным действиям.
The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan immediately changed the nature of the conflict. For the United States, this was not just a regional war. It was another battlefield in the decades-long struggle between two superpowers, America and the Soviet Union. Washington saw an opportunity. If the Soviet Union became trapped in Afghanistan, it could weaken one of America's greatest rivals without fighting a direct war. The goal was not to send American soldiers into battle. Instead, the United States would support Afghan resistance fighters and make the Soviet occupation as costly as possible. Behind closed doors, American intelligence agencies began planning a covert operation. The idea was simple: provide money, weapons, and support to forces fighting the Soviet army. But this strategy carried enormous risks. The fighters being supported were united mainly by one goal: removing the Soviets from Afghanistan. What would happen after the war was something the world would only discover years later. The first step, however, was creating one of the largest covert operations in CIA history. The United States had decided to fight the Soviet Union, but not with American soldiers. Instead, the war would be fought in secret. The operation was called Operation Cyclone. Through the CIA, the United States began providing money and weapons to Afghan resistance groups fighting the Soviet occupation. But Washington wanted to keep its involvement hidden. If American weapons were discovered on the battlefield, the Soviet Union could accuse the United States of directly interfering in the war. So the CIA needed a way to support the resistance without openly entering the conflict. The answer was Pakistan. Weapons and supplies would be secretly transported across the border and distributed to Afghan fighters. The CIA would provide much of the funding, but Pakistan's intelligence agency, the ISI, would play a major role in deciding which resistance groups received support. At first, the operation was relatively small, but as the war continued, American support rapidly increased. Billions of dollars would eventually flow into the conflict. Weapons were purchased from countries around the world, while Afghan fighters received training, equipment, and financial support. Operation Cyclone soon became one of the largest covert operations in CIA history, but the CIA was not directly commanding the Mujahideen. Much of the support moved through Pakistan, giving the ISI enormous influence over the war, and over which Afghan groups became the most powerful. What began as a secret attempt to weaken the Soviet Union was now growing into a massive international proxy war, and Pakistan was about to become the operation's most important gateway. The CIA's plan depended on one crucial country, Pakistan. Sharing a long border with Afghanistan, Pakistan became the main route through which weapons, money, and supplies reached the Mujahideen. But the United States was not operating alone. Pakistan's intelligence agency, the Inter-Services Intelligence, known as the ISI, became the middleman between the CIA and the Afghan resistance groups. The arrangement was simple. America would provide the funding and weapons. The ISI would distribute them inside Afghanistan, but this gave Pakistan enormous control over the war. The CIA wanted to weaken the Soviet Union, but Pakistan had its own interests. Islamabad wanted a friendly government in Afghanistan and supported groups it believed would protect Pakistan's influence after the Soviets left. Because of this, not every Mujahideen faction received equal support. Some groups gained more weapons, more money, and more power than others. As the war continued, the ISI became one of the most important players in Afghanistan's conflict, shaping not only the fight against the Soviet Union, but also the future of the country itself. The secret alliance between America and Pakistan was helping create one of the largest resistance movements of the Cold War. But now came the biggest challenge: turning that resistance into a force capable of defeating one of the world's most powerful armies.